Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is brought to us by Brandon and Becky Mullins. They wanted to shout out Anima Naturalis. They're all over Europe, Central, and South America. This year they were responsible for having bullfighting banned in Mallorca. Their offices are in Barcelona and Madrid. Much respect to Francisco Vasquez, Niera, and Aida Gascon.
That's some pretty good pronunciation.
I probably butchered that shit.
But
third try.
If you want to sponsor an episode, all you have to do is go to whichsidepodcast.com, donate at least $10 because that's how much it costs us to make one of these things. So that's all we ask. And we'll say whatever the fuck you want us to. Hey, Brandon and Becky Mullins, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you for everything you do.
This is episode 115.
Yeah, we have Dino on, author of the cookbook Alternative Vegan, as well as the podcast and blog of the same name.
You can check those out on iTunes, and we'll have a link for the book on the show notes, so make sure to check that out. I absolutely love this chat. We talk a lot about food in this episode, but it's a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned a couple new techniques, so stick around and listen to those.
Yeah, I'm super excited to try.
Oh, God, me too. So what news and events do we have going on this week, Jordan?
Well, if you're in Salt Lake City, the monthly ABC Anarchist Black Cross Prisoner Letter Writing Night will be at Boeing, 7 o'clock.
And if you're not in Salt Lake City, you can always write a prisoner yourself. Or if you are in Salt Lake City and don't want to see Jordan's face, you can just do it yourself and not go.
Fair enough.
For the Slingshot this week, on January 21st, that was the day that Lorena Bobbitt was found not guilty for cutting off her abusive husband's penis. I never know she was found not guilty until the Slingshot. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
So if you like these tidbits that you can get out of this awesome Slingshot personal organizer, pick it up at a local info shop.
If you don't have a local info shop, you can start one, or you can visit AK Press and pick one up there. They don't sponsor us to do this. We just like them.
Because you get awesome shit like that in there. Hey, enjoy this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
Hey, I'm Jordan.
Hi, Jordan.
And I'm Jeremy, so I hope you can tell us apart.
Yeah, I think Jordan has a slightly higher pitched voice.
Ooh, usually they say I do, so that makes me feel good today. So what you been up to today?
I had a friend coming over, so I decided to make some chocolate chip cookies, and just as she was heading down, it went in the oven. So by the time she got here, they were warm out of the oven, and we drank tea and ate cookies.
So, okay.
Sounds like a great day.
I never mix my tea and chocolate chip cookies, so which tea do you pair with chocolate chip cookies?
Oolong.
Well, just straight up oolong, like...
Yeah, black oolong, or I had chamomile because I'm trying to avoid caffeine. But the other two, my husband Steve and my friend Tasha, they both had oolong. It was really good.
So, like, you go in like the darker oolongs, like the more fermented oolongs?
Yeah.
God, oolong is so good. It's such an underrated tea.
Well, because I find that with that really sweet chocolate chip cookie, that oolong kind of like through it. It's not as... Because I have a whole bunch of tea. It's not, like I have a lack of variety, but I'm not trying to throw in an Earl Grey at a cookie. It's not happening.
Yeah, that definitely would not seem to be. So do you mentioned like two of my favorite things right off the bat, which is tea and chocolate chip cookies. So do you go with like super dark chocolate? Do you go like more of a semi-sweet? Like how much of the cacao mix do you put in?
If I can find the really good stuff, I'll put it in, but they're really expensive. So I tend to err on the side of like the semi-sweet that I get at the local grocery store. The Ghirardelli is vegan, so I'll just throw that in there and it's fine.
I love to mix a semi-sweet and a super dark, like a 90%. So you get like that mix in the cookie.
Yeah.
God, it's so good.
A little bit of bitterness along with the sweetness, and it's a perfect mix.
Oh, exactly.
Right.
Jordan's just looking at me like, Jesus Christ.
It's like, that's a lot
Cookies
of
are
effort
serious
for a
business.
cookie.
Yeah, but cookies, like, you got to put the effort in. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, like there's a peanut butter cookie that I make that's like 3 ingredients pretty much as the base. It's a cup of sugar, a cup of flour, a cup of peanut butter. And you add a bit of vanilla extract and some baking soda to it, and you mix it all up together and throw it in the oven. And it makes it super easy for me to like throw whatever mix-ins I want. So like very frequently I'll add chocolate chips to that because it's just like peanut butter and chocolate chips. You're not going to go wrong.
Yeah.
You know,
Peanut butter is probably my favorite cookie.
Yeah, they're okay. I've never been like a huge fan of peanut butter cookies.
It's my issue with peanut butter cookies is that they're oftentimes too soft and cakey.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
I want a crisp cookie with a chewy center
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
That is
all the time.
definitely the key.
But like,
Right.
I like ginger softies more than ginger snaps as well because I don't
Oh,
like
definitely.
like
yeah.
that snap.
I don't like the ginger snaps.
Mhm.
Mm-mm.
No, if it's not moist enough, it's not worth eating.
Oh,
No.
yes.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Because the way I see it is like if you're going to eat food, have it be the best you can and go with it. So like that's why I like this particular peanut butter cookie recipe, because once it's done it takes a while. It takes like 17, 20 minutes or so to finish baking that peanut butter cookie. But once it's done, it's incredibly chewy and soft. So it's not cakey at all, which I hate in a cookie.
Are you cooking it at a low temperature for that
No,
time?
350.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, that's like twice as long as I normally cook a normal cookie.
It's well possible I have a shitty oven.
Okay, yeah. But I've always found that one of my secrets with cookies is to get that really moist inside with that crispy outside is to undercook and let them finish cooking outside of the oven on the pan.
What I'll tend to do is that I'll bump up the baking soda just a titch so that it gets brown quicker.
Okay.
If the recipe calls for a teaspoon, I'll do like a teaspoon and a half and still get away with it. If you go much higher than a teaspoon and a half and the recipe calls for a teaspoon, you're edging into it's going to start tasting like the baking soda.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried increasing sugar to get the browning?
I have. My issue with increasing the sugar too much is that I find that I don't want to crunch into the damn thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And it throws off the moistness balance. Like when I've done the few times when I've increased sugar, usually I'll decrease sugar because I don't want it to be too sweet. I want it to be sweet, but not like choke your throat sweet, which is why I also tend to avoid the store-bought cookies as much as I can because like the store-bought ones are very, very sweet. So
yeah.
I'll err on the side of slightly less sweet and, cut back on the sugar. So every time I've increased the sugar, I've always ended up with sugar crystals, and I've been very unhappy with the results.
It's funny, like this morning I was making waffles with my daughter, and she was, pouring the sugar in. She was measuring it in. And she's like, and I'll do heaping teaspoons because a little extra sugar never hurts. I'm like, that's my daughter.
Waffles, you're fine.
Yeah.
See, that's one thing I don't experiment with is baking. Like, I have a recipe, I follow it. Everything else I'll experiment with, but I just somehow manage to always mess up when I'm baking.
Baking is one of those things that I do experiment with because I've found that as long as I understand the ratios and I'm comfortable with what this batter should look like, it generally comes out okay. Mm-hmm. So there's this banana bread recipe in my cookbook where it calls for a certain amount of flour, a certain amount of banana, and a certain amount of sugar. And my friend Tasha, the one who came over today, was trying to eat healthy. So she was like, can we sort of make this a little bit healthier because I'm trying to watch myself. And I was like, what do you got? So she brought over these bananas that she had frozen, and there were like 6 bananas in there. The recipe calls for 3. Whatever, I threw it in. And rather than using all-purpose flour, I subbed out some of the flour with chickpea flour and with rice flour brown rice flour. I usually don't have hippie flour on hand, but you know,
I don't either, but
I'll get into that in a second. But like, and usually I won't, try to make baked goods healthy because you're eating a fucking cake or a cookie. I mean, like, you're not meant to eat it every day. You're meant to have it once in a while. So goddamn enjoy yourself while you're eating it. So
you're a man of my heart, man.
Right. So like, put in real sugar, put in the fat, throw in all-purpose flour. Don't start fiddling around with fucking whole wheat flour for baked goods. It's not worth the aggravation. If you want to have the benefits of whole wheat flour, go eat a wheat berry salad. You know what I mean? Or like chew on cardboard. It'll have more flavor because like whole wheat flour is disgusting stuff. I don't care for it. So I was like, let me just try and see what happens. So I think I subbed out like half of the flour. I used half all-purpose flour and half combination of chickpea and brown rice flour. And instead of using any fat at all, I had extra bananas. So I was like, whatever, it'll work out. And I mixed it all together. And the batter came out like what it was supposed to look like. I threw it in the oven. It came out divine. As long as the batter looks like it's supposed to look, you can generally get away with stuff.
Do you when you were saying you know the ratios, do you go by weight mostly, or do you go by? Like,
I eyeball it.
You just eyeball it.
I know roughly where I'm supposed to be at. So say for example, it's a cupcake batter. I know that I'm supposed to have something just a hair thicker than pancake batter. And if I want something like a waffle, I'm going to go somewhere between a cake batter and a pancake batter. If I want a pancake batter, I'm going to go a little thicker than a crepe batter. And if I want a crepe batter, I'm going to follow the recipe because they have so much liquid in there that you really can't fuck it up.
Crepes are so weird.
Oh, God. Yeah. I've never made them turn out right, ever.
I make dosa, so that's like the next level crepe.
Yeah, that way bigger too, probably.
Yeah, well, like, the thing with dosa is that you're not even using leavening agents. You're literally depending on wild yeast and everything to do the job for you.
I've never looked at a recipe, so I don't know what goes into a dosa.
Okay, so it's 4 parts of rice to 1 part of urad dal, and I found out quite by accident that if you don't have urad dal, you can use chickpea flour, and it will get you there. But it's a 4-to-1 ratio of rice to bean flour of some sort. I'm sure fava bean flour will work, or the chickpea fava bean, or whatever the fuck you have. I'll use urad dal because I know that's what works every time, and I've never had it fail on me. And I don't like the one that has the black skin still on it. I like the one that's already been hulled. And I prefer the one that's whole rather than the one that's split. So I'm getting really specific here because I know it works every single time. You take the short grain rice, and you want it to be short grain rice because the mix of starches to everything else in there is the right blend to work it. You can use parboiled. Dosa is one of the few reasons to use parboiled rice because parboiled rice is fucking disgusting. It's not worth eating. It's nasty stuff. So you do 4-to-1 of the rice to the dal, and in the rice, along with while you're soaking the rice overnight, you want to add in, let's say, for every cup of rice that you're using, you want about a 1/4 teaspoon ish, maybe a little bit less, of whole fenugreek seeds.
Okay.
You soak that overnight. The next day, you soak urad dal for 1 hour. Urad dal does not need much soaking. And the neat thing about urad dal is that if you soak a whole bunch of it, so say, for example, you're like, all right, I want to make dosa, but I also want to make some fried food because I'm being healthy, so let me be unhealthy. At the same time that you're soaking that 1 cup of urad dal for the 4 cups of rice, you can also soak a couple of extra cups of urad dal at the same time in that same water, and just set it aside and make that as a deep fried fritter. And I'll tell you about that as soon as this is done. So then you take the rice and the fenugreek that you've soaked together and you grind it down to an absolute puree. When you rub the batter between your fingers, you want it to be smooth. Best tool for the job is a Vitamix, but I know most of us aren't millionaires, so use your shitty blender and do them in small little batches. Because you will freak out your blender and it will burn out on you if you try to do too much at a time. So don't grind more than maybe 3/4 of a cup at a time, and it will get ground down. Then you grind up the soaked urad dal and you mix the 2 batters together. and then you let that sit outside, loosely covered for about 6 hours. If it's the winter time and you live in the north like I do, what you can do is while you're grinding the rice into a puree, you add a couple of tablespoons of cooked rice to that and grind the whole thing together, and it'll jumpstart the ferment. And you're basically waiting for this thing to ferment from the wild yeast that was in the air. While that's going, what you can do is either in a food processor or in the same blender, grind up the soaked urad dal that you have with the smallest quantity of water that you can get away with. You want very little water in there if you can help it. Get it out of the blender and then mix it up with some grated ginger, lots of cracked black pepper, some salt, and just deep fry them in little blobs. And it's the most delicious fritter you've ever eaten.
Is that? It sounds very similar to like what a roti fritter would be like the deep fried roti.
It's called medu vada, and it's a very South Indian dish.
Mm.
Just like
so. When can I move into your place?
Well, I'm looking for work, so as soon as I get a larger apartment, we can make that happen.
Because everything you just described is exactly why, besides like some basic curries, I've never delved into Indian cooking, even though I eat it on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm.
It's actually a lot easier than you think it is. There's one technique that I need you to master for Indian cooking, and that's popping spices. Once you have that, everything falls into place.
See, and my big thing is that I buy all my spices usually pre-ground, so I don't have them. I know. And so I've always been like, well, shit, I'm kind of fucked because that's the key to everything.
Okay. I'm going to give you the holy trinity of my spices so that you have them whole on hand at all times, and it'll make your life so much more delicious. It's worth it. Okay.
Oh, I'm grabbing a pen. Like, let me write this down. Okay.
These are the ones that I use in damn near everything. First one is mustard seed, preferably the dark brown or black mustard seeds that you get at the Indian store. If you cannot find it for some reason, get the yellow mustard seeds. They'll do. It's not the best, but it'll do. Okay?
Okay.
Second one is whole cumin seeds. That one, it's absolutely required that it be whole.
I use so much ground cumin. It's unfucking believable.
Wait till you try the whole.
Okay. Third
one is sesame seed.
I have that.
And the reason being, in South Indian cooking, you use a lot of sesame oil for the flavor. Mm-hmm. And I find that in American grocery stores, you don't get the specific kind of sesame oil that we use in South India. So to get that same flavor, what I'll frequently do is that I'll just throw sesame seeds in along with the other spices while I'm popping them in the hot fat, and it'll give me that flavor, and I can fake it really, really well.
Okay.
So what you do is that you start with a deep pot or a wide, shallow skillet or something else like that, something big into which you can pour enormous quantities of fat. If you're shy about oil, you can very well do it in minimal oil if you want. It will still work.
I'm not shy.
If you're not shy, go nuts. You want enough fat to not only coat the bottom of your pan, but like come up a little bit. You know, you want you want a hefty bit of fat in there, okay? Mm-hmm. I don't want you using olive oil. I don't want you using sesame oil. I don't want you using any kind of like finicky oil. You want an oil that can stand up to high heat.
Okay.
Your peanut, your canola, your vegetable, your safflower, your sunflower. Mm-hmm. Okay? If you want to use olive oil later on to get a nice buttery flavor, go ahead and do it at the end. Don't do it in the beginning.
I'm secret. I'm not a huge fan of olive oil most of the time.
There you go. And in this particular case, you do not want to use olive oil because the mustard seeds need a very high heat for them to do what they need to do.
Okay. Coconut oil a no-go?
Coconut oil is workable, but I find that by the time the mustard seeds are ready to pop, it's already lost most of its punch. Mm-hmm. With how expensive coconut oil is, I don't want to have it lose any of that flavor or smell or anything else from it. I want to make sure that you know good and well that I use coconut oil.
Yeah. Well, I'm poor, so canola check.
There you go. But like, I do keep coconut oil on hand because the flavor is wonderful, but like, I'm not trying to cook in it because the second you add anything else to it, you've lost the flavor, and now all of a sudden you might as well have just fried it in canola oil because you lost the aroma and that flavor of that coconut oil. And it's like, well, why did I just spend $10 for this fucking pound of coconut oil?
Yeah.
We're still talking about the oil 5 minutes later. Okay. So Depending on how hot your stove gets, supposing you're using stainless steel or nonstick, you want to put it on medium-high heat, and I'll tell you why. You don't want to use nonstick on high heat because it'll fuck up the nonstickness. And with stainless steel, if you use high heat, it tends to get hot spots. So what you want to do is you want the thing evenly hot all the way through. So preheat it on medium heat, add the oil, and you'll notice the oil going from that thick viscous texture to like almost like a runny, watery texture.
Yeah.
That's how you know it's hot enough. And you want it to be really, really hot. So when you swirl it around the pan, you want it to be hot, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then you want to add a good dose of mustard seeds to it, and don't be shy. You want to add like a good half teaspoon to a teaspoon or so for like, let's say, a can of beans. So you want a fair bit. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Lift the pot off the heat and swirl it around, and you're going to hear it start to pop. And it's going to pop like mad. So if you have a splatter guard, this would be the time to put it over top so that it doesn't get all over your kitchen or hit you in the face or anything else like that, which it has done to me more times than I can count.
So don't do this shirtless.
If you do, wear an apron. Having a flying mustard seed hit your flesh while it's searing hot is not a pleasant experience.
Well, maybe to some.
Maybe to some, but not for me. Once it hit my eyelid, and that was when I was like, all right, I'm using a splatter.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Once the mustard seeds have reached their peak of popping and then they've started to come back down, add your cumin seed.
Okay. Is it still off the heat?
This is on the heat. You wanna put it back on the heat after you swirled it so that it gets more excited.
Okay.
The reason that you lift it off the heat to swirl it is not only to like get everything distributed, but it's also to help prevent it from burning.
Okay.
It's just a thing that I've watched my mother do all my life, and it's worked all this time, so I do it.
Why fix it if it ain't broke?
Why fix it if it ain't broke? And like a lot of cooking is you do things instinctually, not realizing that you watched somebody else do it, and it's always worked.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about this until my friend Dana pointed it out that I do this. And when other people were asking me, like, why are my spices burning when I pop them? She was like, it's because you're probably not lifting it off the heat like Dino does every time he cooks. And I was like, what do you mean I lift it off the heat? She goes, every time I've seen you add the mustard seeds and you immediately lift the pot off the heat and swirl it around. So
it's interesting that you didn't even notice it until someone pointed it out.
But she writes manuals for a living, so the thing she does. So once you've got that going, you add the cumin seeds, and they're going to get very, very fragrant. It's going to smell amazing, and you want to swirl them around a bit too. And then at the end, add your sesame seeds, and they're going to pop like freaking crazy because the sesame seeds like to pop really, really quickly. Once that's done popping, and you don't need to wait for it to get silent. You just need for it to get from like screaming hot, pop, 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 and then it starts settling down a bit. Once that's gotten to that level, you add your aromatics. So that is garlic, onion, peppers, carrots, celery, anything like that that's going to sort of stop the heat from going out of control. You add the aromatics and crank up the heat to as high as it'll go. Okay?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This forms the basis of literally every Indian dish. Basically. You can now vary this with whatever aromatics you use. You can vary it with what spices you like. So supposing you don't want to use mustard seeds and you just want to use cumin seeds and sesame seeds, you can go ahead and do that. Supposing you don't want to use the cumin seeds, you just want to use the mustard seeds, go ahead and do that. Supposing you want to add like some more esoteric stuff like coriander seeds. You want to crush them up a little bit before you throw them in, but you can add that in as well. Fennel seeds work with this technique. Cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, whole cardamom, like pretty much any spice that you have, you can add it to hot fat and pop it with the same exact technique and vary the flavors of whatever it is you're making. So like supposing you want to use this baseline recipe and just use it with onion. Okay, so go ahead and add your onion, fry them until they're softened. You don't need them to get brown, just get them softened all the way through and translucent. Then you can add garlic and ginger and turmeric, and then you'll have the basis for a dal. So you can add any of your beans that you like and cook it together and you have dal. If you want to vary the dal a little bit, what you can do is after adding the turmeric, you can add like a can of crushed tomatoes and saute that around for a while. Then add the beans. You want the beans to be cooked because if you try to cook beans with tomatoes, it's going to take too long.
Yeah.
If you don't want to use all of one kind of bean and you have a couple of different kinds of beans, throw them in. If you don't have onions and you just want to use the spices and the tomatoes, go ahead and do that. If you want to use just garlic, go ahead and do that. If you want to use just ginger, go ahead and do that. If you want to add any fresh herbs to it, this is great because like you can add basil, you can add cilantro, you can add parsley, you can add whatever fresh herbs you have. And we're just talking about beans.
You are making it sound so much more simple than I've ever like viewed it. Like I've always read the recipes and been like, I don't know.
Too many steps.
Yeah.
But like you start with your popping spices, then you add your aromatics of whatever you have lying around the house. And this is the perfect time to use up any bits and bobs that you have lying around because like how many times do you have like half an onion or like a quarter of a pepper or like, you know, a couple of cloves of garlic left over from the head that you need to use up? Like this is a great way to like just use those things up. And this is just beans. Now imagine if you're like, okay, I have a bunch of potatoes. Will the technique work? Yes, it will. Same exact technique. Throw some potatoes in, add some water, bring it to a boil, cook it until it's, you know, stewy, and you're done. If you want to do it with any kind of vegetable that you like, can go into the same technique. And if you want to make it more of a dry curry rather than a wet one, don't add the water. Just, you know, stir fry it in there until it's cooked on medium-low heat so that it gets done. Root vegetables work really great. If you want to make the basis for a soup, this is really, really excellent for a soup. What you do is you do that popping spices. You add your aromatics, and you add as many as you can. You add the garlic, the onion, the ginger, the carrots, the celery, the peppers, the whatever you have. You saute those until they get soft. You add a can of those crushed tomatoes. Then you add like a cup or two of red lentils. Do you guys get those easily?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Add a cup or two of red lentils. Add about double the amount of water as you have red lentils. So if you have 2 cups of red lentils, you add about 4 cups of water. Bring it to a rushing boil. And when the red lentils start to fall apart, you have red lentil dal. However, this is the perfect time to add any random vegetables that you have lying around. So if you have daikon radish, if you have turnips, if you have rutabaga, if you have broccoli, if you have collard greens, whatever you have, throw it into the pot and let it do its business, come to a boil. Once all the veggies are cooked, you throw in some coconut milk if you like it. If you don't have any, don't put it. Almond milk works great in there as long as it's unsweetened. If you have some like roasted nuts or whatever, you can throw it in there. And then now you've got soup and you've got a billion different variations because like whatever vegetables you have, you throw it in there and you're done.
You're just like melting my mind right now. So since we got onto Indian cooking, didn't even mean to. When do you use a tandoori ever?
No.
Okay, so how do you get the super high heat for like say like roasting an eggplant for like bang and bharta? How do you get that super high heat to like roast it that you would normally get inside the tandoori?
Because we live in the United States, we all have access to an oven.
Okay.
Most people in India don't. Even if you had a tandoor, would have issues because you wouldn't know exactly where in that thing to place it. Right?
So I was always, maybe this is just my misunderstanding, that tandooris can get between like 850 to 900 degrees.
Oh, they can get screaming hot.
And that was like the key to them, where the standard oven, I think mine peaks out like at 550.
Do you guys have a grill?
Yeah.
That will do the job.
Okay.
In fact, that'll probably do a job better than what you can get in the tandoor because, like, with the grill, you can actually control the heat.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you imagine how lovely it would be, especially if you have one of those charcoal grills, to get that smoked eggplant going.
Oh, God.
It would totally give it a different flavor.
That's my favorite meal of all time, by the way.
That's the same with naan, too, because I always had the misunderstanding that you couldn't make, like, naan without a tandoori. No,
you can absolutely make it without tandoori because if you have a grill, like just throw it on the grill and it'll be fine.
Well,
you'll be fine.
You're melting my mind again.
Or if you have a pizza stone and you want to put it into your oven at 500 degrees for about a half hour to get it heated up properly, that will do the job.
Okay, I do have a pizza stone, so that's an option also.
There you go. So like, you guys are ahead of the game already.
So with that, I guess I'm thinking like naan and roti and like the difference there. Like,
isn't it just the flour?
Well, okay, so roti is usually made with whole wheat flour. Not the whole wheat flour as we know it, but it's called atta. It's called chapati atta or something like that. You can find it in the Indian store. It's ground a little bit finer, and it doesn't seem to have as much bran as the whole wheat flour that you get in the hippie stores. So it does have a little bit of all-purpose flour mixed in there so that the thing actually tastes like you want to eat it. I have a little bit of disdain for health food. So anyway, in case you couldn't tell. And naan is made out of all-purpose flour. And usually naan is not vegan because they usually add yogurt or butter to it. Whereas roti, 9 times out of 10 is vegan until they add the ghee to it at the end. But most places will happily make it for you without the ghee because the ghee is very expensive.
Mm-hmm. And I've also heard most places in the States don't actually use real ghee anyways.
Correct.
It's so expensive.
Yeah, it is atrociously expensive, and that's good for me because I don't want them using it in the first place.
Yeah.
There's a place we go to here that they're like, they always whisper to us, yeah, it's not real ghee, it's actually vegan, don't worry.
The thing about roti, though, is that you have to knead it a very long time by hand. It does not work. You have to take the least amount of water that you can and combine it with the whole wheat flour that you have. And you have to knead it long enough that the outside of the dough, the ball, the dough ball is silky smooth. It's not something that I would suggest. Like, you see these recipes online for roti where they're like, oh, it's so easy, just do this, that, and the third. And I'm like, go fuck yourself. I don't have that kind of arm strength. It's not happening. Like, you'll see women making roti in very tiny quantities. Well, that's because they have to stand there and knead that thing for ages. Like, you're talking a good half hour of kneading nonstop. And
Jesus
it has
Christ.
to go from that craggly surface to just a perfectly smooth surface. And the only way the roti comes out properly is if you knead it that long. And I think part of it is because there's so much bran in there that it breaks up the gluten, so it doesn't have a chance to get chewy and stretchy unless you really work it. Mm-hmm. So I don't have that kind of patience. And so the Indian store sells frozen discs of roti that's already been kneaded and rolled out into a thin disc that I can just fry up on my stove and I'm done.
That's just amazing.
And the Mexican store carries those whole wheat tortillas for really cheap. So I'm like, hey, that's roti right there. I'm done.
Yeah, I max out at kneading at about 10 minutes. Any more than that, I'm way done.
Yeah.
I used to have a bread machine when I lived in Florida, and I tried to make the roti dough in there. It wasn't the same. It just wasn't the same. It has to be kneaded by hand. I wouldn't bother with it.
I now you told me how long it needs to be kneaded. I probably will never ever try it making it myself. There's no point.
It's not worth it, especially not when you have really good quality roti that's being sold in the store. Like, they even have methi roti, which is like they take the fenugreek leaves and they knead it into the dough, and it's got this wonderful flavor. So like when you bake it, when you fry it up on the stove, the entire house smells with this like fresh herb smell, and it tastes really great, and it's really easy to do, and it's actually relatively cheap. I think I've seen them at the Indian store for like $1 for 5 of them. You really can't go wrong, especially when this is such a pain in the ass to do at home. However, that basic Indian food, popping spices thing that I gave you is pretty much the basis for most of it.
I'm definitely going to try that now. I'm going to just do it. So
if you read my book, you'll see that like 90% of the recipes start there.
Okay.
And then they all kind of like are variations on a theme. So it's like, when I wrote that book, I was like, why do I need to write this down? This is such a simple technique that like writing it down almost seems kind of ridiculous. So like I wrote in the introduction, like once you're done reading this thing and you've mastered the techniques, I hope that you won't need it anymore and you'll be able to make your own up, because this is really simple stuff.
Well, that's what I love about, learning cooking, is that when you can learn those base techniques and then adapt them to yourself as you need. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I absolutely love about cooking.
And that's what I've been telling people to do for years, is like, I've done my job if I put myself out of business.
Well, earlier you mentioned tea a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about tea, because I just love tea.
Sure.
What is your favorite oolong? Like, what's your favorite kind of oolong tea?
I haven't had a chance to buy too many oolongs that I like as much. With regards to black tea, I've become really fond of the Keeman tea.
Uh-huh.
That one is really clean and easy drinking. I'm a huge fan of the jasmine pearl tea, where they take the jasmine flower and they roll it up in the green tea leaves.
I have always found jasmine to be too perfumey for me.
If you get the jasmine pearl tea, there's only one jasmine flower per ball.
Okay, I've never tried that one, so I'll try that.
Horrendously expensive. There's a store in Queens that carries it, and I think it's like $180 a pound.
Yeah, that's a little pricey.
It's a little pricey, but they're all hand rolled, so like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Have you ever tried milk oolong?
No, what's that?
It's a special type of oolong that's only grown in one province of China, but it has a natural increase of lactose sugar inside of it, so it has like a creamy flavor to it.
Oh,
it's fucking amazing. Like, I don't even know how else to describe it to you. It's
vegan, because people are always confused.
Well, you have to be careful, because
like,
the cheap ones, they will just add like whey to it to try to make it like whatever. But the real traditional milk oolong is vegan. It's just natural tea leaves, but it's the best thing in the world.
When I make masala chai at home, I'll always use the Assam tea. Mm-hmm. Because that one is meant to be boiled. And masala chai is one of the easiest things to make in the world. If you have fresh ginger, you're good. You just need to add a fair bit of tea to it, because like you're going to dilute it with almond milk. So like it does need, a fair bit of strength. Otherwise it's not going to taste right. You boil the tea with sliced ginger, cinnamon sticks, cardamom pods, a couple of cloves, a few black peppercorns, whole black peppercorns, and just bring it to a rushing boil and let that sucker go for a while. And once it's gotten nice and fragrant, you strain it and add plenty of sugar and almond milk, and it's a lovely, lovely, comforting thing on a cold day.
I have never tried making it from scratch myself. I've always just bought the pre-made mixes.
I find that the pre-made mixes tend to be a little bit bland for my liking.
Uh-huh.
Here's the issue with ground spices. All right. The second you grind the spice, you're losing flavor every moment, after you've ground the spice. So if you've got ground spices sitting for a long time, they're going to lose their punch. So like your best bet is to either just cook them whole, in the case of the cumin and the mustard and the sesame and things like that, or to grind them yourself in such small quantities that you're using them up within a week. Because they're gonna go south on you. Like it's worth investing in like a $20 coffee grinder and just grinding it yourself, or like one of those nice granite mortar and pestles that they sell on Amazon for like $25. You can get one shipped to you, and they have like a 2-cup capacity. You can crush the seeds in there, and you're good to go.
So would you add that instead of popping, or?
Yeah. Okay. So the popping spices are absolutely necessary. Okay, so here's the difference between North Indian and South Indian food, okay? Mm-hmm. In the North, what they like to have is consistency of flavor. They want every bite to have a little bit of each of the spices. So what they tend to do is that they'll add ground spices at the end of cooking, like that garam masala. They'll add it at the end so that everything has sort of like a uniform flavor. In the South, we like each bite to taste a little bit different. So we tend to use whole spices in the South and tend not to put too many things in there that are going to blend into the background sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it is a personal preference thing. I'm going to think that the Southern food is superior because that's where I'm from. But there are, there is an argument to be made for having that consistency of flavor going all the way throughout, because then you get a little bit of everything in every bite, which is kind of nice. It's a personal preference thing. And if you look at the northern recipes, a lot of them will call for garam masala, and they'll usually tell you, if it's a good one, they'll tell you to add it at the end of the cooking. Because if you cook garam masala, it loses its flavor. The cinnamon in there gets slimy and gross. So you want to just add it at the end and just toss it through. Oh, there's a tip for you. That's how you can tell if it's a good recipe or not. If they tell you to cook the garam masala, they don't know what they're talking about.
I've actually never seen them call for cooking it until I've always seen it added at the end. So
there you go. You've got good recipes.
I guess so. Yeah. So we just jump started right into food for yeah, I guess it's hard when you're vegan. It's just tends right for that, right? But like, what is your origin? What brought you to veganism?
I was in Florida at the time, and I was listening to a podcast where, well, okay, so I was raised vegetarian to begin with.
Okay.
So, you know, I was raised South Indian vegetarian, which means that we did eat a lot of yogurt, but pretty much with regards to dairy products and eggs, there wasn't too terribly much of it in there, because South Indian cooking just doesn't call for it too terribly much. And my mother would take us to the vegetarian potlucks, which were really vegan, but, you know, they called them vegetarian so as not to scare people off. And I got to be around other people who were vegetarian and vegan from a young age. So by the time I hit middle school and I was trying to figure out why we're vegetarian, my mom had no clue, because she's like, well, because my parents were. And so I was like, there's got to be something more than this. So I started doing my own research in middle school, and found the arguments for, you know, how, you know, killing animals causes them harm and all the rest of it. So that was fine. That was already firmly within my head. But I never made the connection between dairy and eggs and the suffering of animals. So like it didn't click quite yet. Then I was in college, and I started listening to a podcast. This was around 2004, 2005. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to a vegan podcast where they were talking about, well, you should probably go vegan if you're, you know, interested in animals not being harmed. And I didn't know what they were talking about. So I started doing some reading about like the dairy and the egg industries. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. So once it sunk in that I should go vegan, because nobody had mentioned it before, everybody was like, you should be vegetarian, you should be vegetarian. So like you would see the big pamphlets from like the major animal rights organizations talking about being vegetarian. So I was like, well, I am vegetarian, so whatever. It wasn't until people started saying the word vegan and emphasizing that it's important to make a moral choice to be vegan that I started looking into it, because all this time, everyone who kept saying vegetarian, you know, was basically just telling me that I'm fine. You know, they would say vegetarian, but really mean vegan, but I'm just hearing vegetarian. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The message got diluted all that time until someone finally said, you should be vegan. If you care about animals, you should be vegan. And I didn't know what that meant, so I started looking into it. And then once I realized, oh, okay, this isn't really that hard, because it was pretty much like cut out the dairy, cut out the eggs. I was like, I can do that easily because most of my meals don't involve them anyway. So it was a very short jump to vegan. And then after that, it was a question of going through my wardrobe and going through my products and everything else like that, and making sure that all those are vegan as well. So I'd say like it took me about a month or so to, you know, use up all the stuff in the house and go full on vegan. Mm-hmm. And then I gave away like my leather jackets and my leather shoes and other things like that. And, you know, slowly started, you know, going to the thrift stores and finding secondhand shoes that didn't have leather in them, or, you know, the Payless or whatever. And it's been a process. But the actual going vegan took about a month.
That's not bad. How did your family and friends like respond to it? Because it seems like you already had a pretty supportive group as far as being vegetarian is concerned.
My dad had to stop consuming dairy in his late 50s because he developed an allergy to it, to where his face would swell up and his eyes would swell shut, and he would get congested to the point of he'd have trouble breathing. So he had to cut out dairy to begin with, and he never ate eggs. So he started eating vegan a couple of years before I went vegan. So he was fine. He was like, oh, all right. So whatever you cook, I'm going to be able to eat. Great. No problem. My mom was a little bit more confused as to why it was necessary. Mm-hmm. But she was supportive. She was like, you know what? You do what you need to do. Just don't expect me to do it. And I was like, all right, that's fine. No, that's a lie. I was like, you're fucked up, but that's... that's when you're, newly minted as a vegan and you're, pissed off at the world, and it's like, I can't believe all these people are doing this, and you're really mad, and you're really, into like telling people why they're wrong. I have calmed down over the years, obviously, except about health food, but listen, I'm so sick of hearing vegan and health food in the same breath. It's not. I can be just as unhealthy as I want and still be vegan. Anyway, so my mom was fine after she understood why I decided to go vegan. The rest of my family is just mainly confused, but they're happy to buy almond milk when I'm there.
That's good.
I mean, what more can you ask for?
Yeah. It sounds like really, actually pretty supportive compared to some people.
Right.
Yeah.
My mom still doesn't really get it. So, like, she doesn't understand why I would have an objection to eating soy yogurt made out of the starter from dairy yogurt. She doesn't understand that,
Okay. Yeah.
Like, there's certain small little things that she doesn't quite get. But my sister-in-law, who I'm very surprised about, my eldest brother's wife, is extremely supportive in the sense that when my mom was having this, I don't want to call it an argument, but it was an argument about like the dairy starter for the soy yogurt, my sister-in-law was like, you know what? Everybody's entitled to their own beliefs. Leave them alone. Which was very surprising because as dairy and egg eaters go, my brother and his wife and their 2 kids are fairly heavy eaters of dairy. But like she was kind of like, okay, if this is his belief, let him have it.
So do you come from a large family? Do you have lots of
very
brothers
large family? I have 2 older brothers, younger sister, countless cousins, uncles, aunts, etc., etc. So I'm used to having huge amounts of people around me all the time. And Stephen comes from a huge family. So again, like every time we get together with either one of the families, it's always this ridiculously huge gathering.
Are you guys the only vegans in there in the gatherings?
Yep. Yeah, the only vegans. However, since my entire side of the family is vegetarian, for them it's very easy to accommodate us. In fact, because we're all South Indian, it's even easier for them to accommodate us because the few recipes that call for dairy are so involved and so expensive that people tend not to make them very often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we're asking for things like dal and rice and vegetables and things like that, they're like, oh, you want the stuff that, is cheap to make. All right. Oh, you don't want the most expensive part of it to go on there. All right. More for me. So with my family, it's been very easy. And with Steve's family, the neat thing is that although they live in the Midwest, they're all extremely adventurous eaters. So whenever I come and they know I'm cooking, the entire family will converge on the house and be like, all right, where's the food?
That's great. So they're like excited to actually try like these vegan meals. That's awesome.
Because the first time I cooked for everybody, I made stuff that they could recognize, but I made it vegan. So I made mashed potatoes, which is simplest recipe in the world. It's a 5-pound bag of potatoes that you boil until it's soft, and then you add a can of coconut milk to it and mash it together, and it's done.
Yeah.
Salt, pepper, done. And it's very easy to make. And I made like a cream gravy out of mushrooms and soy milk, and it came out really great. And like I made like really, stick to your ribs comfort food sort of stuff. And everybody can recognize pasta with marinara sauce, and I can make a really good marinara with lots and lots of fat. So I add plenty of olive oil when the thing is done cooking. So you taste it. I can make a really good hummus, and everybody loves hummus unless you're broken.
Okay, let me ask you a question about hummus because my daughter hates it. I can't figure out how to get her to like it.
What is it about it that she dislikes?
I can't pin it down because every once in a while we'll get like a new brand or we'll try a new recipe and she'll be like, I like it. And then the next time she's like, ew, this is gross.
She's also 8.
She's 8. Okay.
She's 8. Have you tried the white bean rosemary dip?
No.
Okay, it's a can of cannellini beans that you puree with a couple of sprigs of rosemary that you take off of the stalk.
Uh-huh.
A little tiny bit of garlic, not very much, maybe like a clove or so of garlic. And and you puree it with some salt and a little bit of white pepper. And when it's done, you drizzle on some olive oil and you eat it with bread. And it's really, really delicious.
I will have to try that. Like today for lunch, I made her, I don't know what you call it. It's like that chickpea fake faux chicken salad stuff, whatever. Yeah. And this today was the first time she's actually like, oh, this is delicious. And both me and my wife were like, oh my God, like this is crazy. She likes it this time. Like,
right. No, but like she's 8. She's asserting her individuality and her authority and whatever else over the one thing that she can control, which is food, because like at school she can't control anything, at home she can't control anything, you know, her bedtime is told to her, her everything else is told to her, so pretty much the only thing she can control is food. What I've found with kids who are willing to try things but may not necessarily like them over and over again is that if you get them to make it, they're a little bit more willing to give it a shot.
Yeah, that has seemed to help a lot. That's true. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So if you can get her to like try a couple of different versions, there's also the lentil and sunflower dip, which is also fairly easy to do. Do you guys have Trader Joe's out there?
Yeah.
Trader Joe sells this lentils that's already been cooked and it's in a vacuum pack. Have you seen that before?
I haven't.
I don't normally shop at Trader Joe's, but yeah,
I've never relatively seen cheap. I think it's like $2.50 for a pound of it.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah,
and it's already boiled. And what you do is that you take a cup of sunflower seeds, a cup of sautéed onion. So like you take like the largest onion that you have, chop it up into pieces, then brown it until it's dark brown. And you need about a cup of that sautéed onion. So you'll want like 2 or 3 onions so you have plenty of it. And a cup and a half of the lentils, and you puree it in a food processor with like salt and black pepper and like a little bit of blackstrap molasses. And you puree it until it's completely, pureed. And it's extremely delicious. It's very easy to make.
When you say a little bit of the blackstrap molasses, how much is a little bit to you?
For the 1 cup, maybe like a teaspoon or 2.
Okay.
It's just to boost the sweetness of the onions. That's all. You want a little bit of sweetness in there, not too much. And very simple to make, and it's something that you can bang out fairly easily. With regards to the hummus, do you use tahini?
Yeah.
You do. How much?
Oh God, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not that good.
Okay, what you want to do is instead of adding water to your hummus, and we're going to go down unhealthy territory here.
I'm completely unhealthy. I don't care.
Okay, good. You want to do like a couple of cloves of garlic for a can of chickpeas and drain out all the water so that you don't have any water at all. And puree it with oil instead of water.
Okay.
And I promise you the flavor will be so much better by 1,000,000 times. When it's done, blend the tahini through it and the lemon juice and the whatever and the salt and the whatever. And just before serving, I want you to toast some cumin seeds dry in a pan for about a couple of minutes until they smell fragrant. And crush it in a mortar and pestle and sprinkle it over the top of your hummus. And I promise you it will taste so much better than any hummus you've ever had before. That freshly toasted cumin seed just gives it something else.
I'm going to have to go to the store and get those today.
Yeah. It's definitely worth it because it'll really that aroma of the cumin seed will cover the bitterness of the tahini. I find that tahini tends to be bitter. So the longer it sets, the more that bitter note seems to come out. And for a younger palate, that bitterness will be very sharp and strong. They'll notice it a lot more than you will.
I never even thought about that aspect of it for her, that she's noticing, like that bitterness.
Yeah, so it's well possible that if you put something in there that's going to cover some of that bitterness and take away that bitter edge of it, she'll be able to appreciate it more. And especially if you finish it off with extra virgin olive oil, you make some depressions in the hummus with your finger and just fill them up with olive oil so that when you're scooping the bread, you get a little bit of olive oil, you get a little bit of hummus, a little bit of cumin, and you get this flavor explosion. Bonus points if you add lots of chopped parsley to it.
That sounds so good.
God damn, you're making me so hungry.
My mom likes to do a thing with the leftover hummus that she just invented off the fly. She'll chop up some cabbage really finely, she'll shred it, chop it up into small pieces. She'll chop up a couple of dill pickles she'll chop up half an onion really finely and shred a little bit of carrot, and she'll take that hummus and mix it almost like a coleslaw. And the flavor is amazing. With some fresh dill, it's like a coleslaw but tasty.
I just was in Phoenix and had a tahini slaw that was very similar to that. So, but just tahini.
It was probably a little bit too bitter for your daughter, though. So that's why I'm saying, like, try it with the hummus. And
that's a really good idea.
That creaminess of the hummus and that sourness from the dill pickles and that combination of the cabbage and the carrots really tastes great. And I hate coleslaw that's sweet.
Yeah, we differ there.
With fiery passion. If you want to make it a little bit sweet, go ahead and add a bit of sweet pickles rather than the sour pickles. Like that's your choice to make. But left to me, I'd rather have a half sour pickle. But each person likes something different, and you're entitled to your beliefs, just like I am.
I just like slaw. I like it all. Like honestly, I don't think I've had a vegan slaw that I haven't enjoyed. But
have you tried the raw beet and apple one?
I won't eat beet. I'm sorry.
Neither will I.
I'm not a hippie.
Neither will I.
Beets are delicious. I don't know.
They're all.
Oh God, no. Mm-mm.
It's shredded beets, shredded carrots, shredded Granny Smith apples, peanut butter, ginger, sriracha, and a little bit of salt and pepper, and just like a bit of rice wine vinegar to bring everything together. It's the only time I've ever eaten beets and actually liked it.
That actually does sound good, though, minus the beets.
Well, because like with the apple and the carrot and the sriracha and the peanut butter and the cider,
does it just mask the pure dirt taste of
beets?
Beets?
It takes the dirt taste away from the beets.
Okay.
You have to try borscht. It's just
you don't have to.
Good.
No, you really don't.
It's like an earthy stew. It's so good.
It's like eating dirt.
It's not. It's not. But I love it. That's the only thing I eat beets in.
I remember it was like a year ago. I came over to Jordan's house and I opened the door. I'm like, it smells like fucking earth in here. He's like, yeah, I'm making borscht. I'm like, what the hell?
Why is this a thing?
Because it's delicious.
Oh, yeah. The last time I had a beet, it was on an accident. It's because I wasn't looking as I was putting something in my mouth and instantly spit it out. Like, what the fuck is this?
Beets are a terrible food that just should not be inflicted on anyone.
So what gave you this absolute love and amazing talent of cooking? Like, how did you cultivate that?
We are a family of 6, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm a mama's boy, and wherever my mother was, I had to be there. And she told me years later, when I'm an adult, like whenever we would go out for to the temple or to social events or whatever, she noticed that even if I was playing with my friends, I would make sure that I always had her in my sights, that I could always see her. Mm-hmm. So like I was attached to my mother from a very early age, and so I had to be wherever my mother was. And when you're a family of 6, the bulk of the time that the mother is going to be is the kitchen. So I'd always be in the kitchen with my mom, and from a very early age, and I'm talking like from being old enough to walk, I would follow her into the kitchen whenever she would go in there. And because there's nobody else in the kitchen, who do you talk to but the person who's in there with you? So she would get into conversations with me, and then as I got older, she would be like, well, while you're at the sink, can you wash this vegetable? And then I would. And as time went on, she would be like, well, while you're at the sink, can you wash this vegetable and then chop it? Like if it was broccoli or cauliflower, she would just be like, take it off of the head and, break it up into pieces with your hands, mm-hmm. which then graduated into, well, here's a small knife that I can trust you with. It's not the huge chef's knife. Why don't you just go give this a chop? As long as she didn't give a crap about how the thing was chopped up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't things like, potatoes where it has to be the same size, otherwise it's not going to cook evenly. It would be things like she could throw it into a stew and she's not bothered whether something is like perfectly the same size. As long as it's in the same ballpark, she's okay. Mm-hmm. And then it became, okay, I have to run to the bathroom right quick. Can you keep an eye on the stove? And then it became, I have to go shower. We have people coming over. Can you make the dal? And then it became, can you make the dal and the rice and the salad and the everything else? And so like, by the time I was like 12 or 13, I was able to make full-on meals for my family. And she was inordinately proud about this. Like she loved the fact that I knew how to cook. So she would tell all her friends, my son is such a good cook. He knows how to do, recipes all the time. On top of which, my second oldest brother, I idolized him because he's extremely intelligent, and he would he would constantly bring me different books to read, and I always loved books. So I constantly wanted to be around him because then I could discuss these books that I've read with him. Now, when he would bring his friends over to visit, he would show me new things to cook, and he would supervise me in the kitchen while I'm cooking so that I wouldn't hurt myself or something. And again, I'm like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And again, he was inordinately proud of it. So two people who I idolized, my second brother and my mother, would brag about my cooking abilities. And so food became, to me, something that was so much more than nutrition. It became a way to connect with people whom I looked up to so much and whose approval I wanted so desperately. And then over time, there were certain things that my mother couldn't teach me because in South India, you don't have ovens. So she had not a clue about baking. So I had to learn that on my own. And that was around the time when Food Network started becoming a thing and we got cable TV. So I would watch Food Network for hours and hours and hours. Julia Child, Two Fat Ladies, like How to Boil Water. All these shows were like on all the time. And so I would watch these TV chefs cook up things so effortlessly. And I was like, well, if you can do it, I know I can do it. Because if I can make, a 3-4 course meal for my family in an hour, I can do this simple thing that you're doing. So I started expanding my repertoire past what my mother would always buy at the store. And then I knew how to make these other things. I knew how to bake. I knew how to fry. I learned how to do all these different things. It started with being in the kitchen with my mother and incidentally being asked to help out. And it became something that I could, please them with because I love to please people whom I care about. And then over time, as I got older and older, I started realizing that my cooking did things to people. Like it brought them together, and it dawned on me that cooking for someone is about one of the most intimate acts that you can share with that person because they're taking something that you've wrought with your hands and they're making it a part of their bodies. I'm not sure how much more intimate than that you can get.
I've never really thought about it that way, but that's really, really true.
Yeah. So for me, when I cook for someone that I love, it's like, I love you so much that I want something that I've made for you to become part of you. And I want the positive emotions and feelings that I'm having while I'm cooking this food to be part of your life and your experience. And so ever since I came to that realization sometime around high school, cooking has gone from something that I enjoy doing to something that I love doing. And ever since then, for the past 15, 20 years, I've really, really enjoyed cooking and tried to expand my horizons so that I can make more and interesting things. Because as a vegan, I feel like we almost have to be wizards. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When we're trying to recreate these textures and these smells and these experiences that we had as children eating those non-vegan foods, you want to get, because everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants those same comforting foods that we ate growing up. And so by learning to cook vegan, I've had to expand my horizons so much further than I ever thought I would, but I still hate health food.
Well, is there anything that we haven't gotten around to that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I was curious if you guys do have any Indian stores or anything out there in Salt Lake City.
Actually, quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are actually pretty damn lucky when it comes to that.
So all this stuff is easy enough for you to get access to?
For us, it is,
totally.
Yeah. For our lovely listeners in other areas of the world, I doubt it, but...
I can probably say that 90% of the people listening can probably get their hands on cumin seeds somewhere.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, cumin is one of the...
It's pretty universal, and although the mustard seeds may be a little bit trickier to get, the Indian version, I'm sure they can find something like yellow mustard seeds, and it will do the job. And sesame seeds are fairly universal. Pretty much everywhere I've been has them.
Yeah, I think those three are definitely universal.
Right.
Yeah.
The turmeric will be a little bit trickier to get, just because, not everybody uses it, but I found it in South America when I was in Ecuador. I found it in most of the US. Like I've been able to find turmeric, and I'll give you permission to use curry powder if you can't find turmeric.
Is it bad that I keep both on hand?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, it's perfectly fine, because sometimes you want something that you can just throw together and throw to the oven, because like, okay, so supposing you're in a hurry and you want something quick, what you can do is get a bag of frozen veggies from the freezer and dump it out into a bowl, into a microwave-safe bowl, toss it with a little bit of oil and some curry powder, and then throw it in the microwave for like 5-10 minutes, and it's done.
That's quick. I don't think I cook any of my meals quicker than 30 minutes.
30 minutes is about reasonable to expect for a meal, but okay, so supposing you've got this side that's going in the microwave for 5-6 minutes or so, right?
Uh-huh.
Then you pop your cumin seeds and your mustard seeds, your mustard seeds and your cumin seeds in the oil, and you just add a can of beans to that, because you don't need aromatics if you don't have it. Okay?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Bring it up to a boil, it's done. Right?
Yeah.
Loaf of bread, you've got dinner.
I think you just described my dinner tonight.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say is, like, if you're in a pinch and you don't have a lot of time to make something elaborate, like, you have your vegetable side, you have your starch, you have your protein, you've got your beans, all done. And it barely took a couple of minutes. There's a quick garbanzo soup recipe in the book where it's like a can of beans, a can of tomatoes, and those 2-3 spices, and it's done in 5 minutes. And people complained that there's not enough in that recipe to make more. And then I remind them, how long did it take you to make? Just make more. It's not going to take that long. Once they realize that, they're like, oh yeah, that's right. You don't even need to drain the water from the can of beans. You literally just open the can, and they even have those cans now that have the pop tops. So like, you open the freaking can, you throw it in the hot oil with the spices, you're done in less than 5 minutes. If you have the patience to make rice, make some rice. If you don't have patience to make rice, make ramen noodles. I don't care. Like,
I don't have the patience, so I always make like double the rice when I make it.
That's what you should
save
do.
it. Yeah.
And if you want it even tastier, what you do is you mix the rice into the boiling beans and like let the rice reheat in the boiling beans so that you don't have to use your microwave while that's going. And then you have beans and rice and vegetables. And it's like, how long did that take? That's ridiculous.
I'm so hungry now.
And if you don't have curry powder, you can use Mrs. Dash. If you don't have Mrs. Dash, you can use Italian seasoning. If you don't have that, you can use whatever you have lying around. The point is like, there's no excuse if you have a little bit more money, because here's the thing. Frozen vegetables are more expensive. I will completely admit that. Canned beans are way more expensive than dried beans. And I'll admit that too. But like, you can't say, I have no time, I have no money, I have no skill. Like, you've got to have something, otherwise you can't eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to convince me that eating out is going to come nearly as cheap as eating at home.
Oh, never.
Right.
Never going to happen.
So, like, if you don't have the money, get the can of beans, get the bag of frozen veg, get, like, some cheap-ass bread from the store. Like, get the cheap stuff and make it at home. If you have more time, that same technique of popping the spices and frying the vegetables in works for frozen vegetables. In fact, frozen vegetables work really, really well with this technique. And I've managed to save many a dinner where an unexpected guest comes over, and then I can pretend, oh no, I had plenty of food all along. You're fine. Because here's the secret. If you make an extra dish or two, it's going to seem like you made more food even though you didn't.
That's a really good point. I've never thought about it that way.
So, like, if you have more people than you expected, make an extra dish. It's not going to take you but 5 minutes. So supposing you have your menu planned and you've made your seitan roast and you've made your potatoes and you've made your pasta and you've made all your other stuff and it's all done and ready. And then all of a sudden you have an extra 3 people. Throw a couple of cans of beans with some cumin and mustard seeds and you've got all of a sudden a, quote, bean soup that you've done in like 5 minutes, and you bring that to the table. While that's going, you throw some frozen veg in the microwave for 5 minutes, and that's done. Now you've got 2 extra dishes. Everyone's going to take less of each thing, and now they feel like, oh my God, you've gone all out and made all these dishes, and it didn't take you that long.
That's awesome.
Well, hearing all of this, now it is on my bucket list to actually attend one of these meals that you create.
Yes. New York is a lovely city, and we have neighborhoods for pretty damn near any cuisine that you want to cook. So, like, running down to the marketplace, although it may take a while because, you know, it's a bit of a hike on the subway, but once you get all those ingredients, you bring it back home. There's 1,000 different things you can make. And I've watched other people do these same techniques, such as making an extra dish when they have unexpected visitors, that kind of thing. And it works. It works really well. And everybody's impressed. They're like, oh, you really went to a lot of trouble when you really didn't. Because the other side of it is the oven is your friend. I never had access to an oven when I was a kid because the oven was used for storage. Mm-hmm. Now that I have the oven, what I'll often do is, like, supposing there's this South Indian potato dish that's like dry roasted. So you do the cumin and the mustard seeds and the turmeric, and then you toss potatoes in there, and you keep tossing them until they're cooked all the way through. Then you crank up the heat to high until they get crispy. What I'll do is that I'll toss the potatoes in the spices and the oil and the salt and the chili and everything else like that. I'll put it on the baking sheet and bake it at 350 degrees for 25 minutes, and they get done. Now, while that's going, there's no reason why I can't throw other shit in the oven at the same time. So this is like, okay, I have a bag of frozen Brussels sprouts, toss them in oil, toss them in salt and pepper, throw them in. I have frozen green beans. I'll toss that in oil, toss them in salt and pepper, throw them in. And then now I've got 3 dishes parked in the oven that barely took me any time at all. And now I can focus on other stuff and making more dishes. And now everything looks so much more impressive, even though I'm not making too terribly much of each thing. That's the other thing is, like, if you have to make huge quantities of each thing, the chance for fuck-ups are so much better.
Yeah.
Make less, make smaller quantities, just make more variety. And nobody has to know that you're cheating.
Well, this has been a total lesson for me today, by the way. It's been awesome. Thank you very much.
This was so much fun to talk to you guys.
Well, how can people... I can't believe we're already at an hour. It's crazy.
I know, it flew by.
So how can people follow your work and get in contact with you and follow you?
I'm on the Blogspot. My website is altveg, altveg.blogspot.com. That's where I post my, ramblings and my podcast episodes and everything else. You can also find the podcast on iTunes. It's under Alternative Vegan. Or you can email me. My email address is altveg, altveg @me.com.
Sweet. Well, we end every episode saying, fuck, shit, damn. Would you mind saying it for us this week?
Fuck, shit, damn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Okay, have a wonderful night.
Bye.
Bye. This week you heard
Quadrospazzed by DOCs.
Right now you're listening to
Maoist by Polar Goldie Cats.
iTunes. Seriously, just go rate us and review us on there. And subscribe if you haven't. And if you have a friend, give them a nudge. Say, hey, check out these guys. Grab their phone. Subscribe on their phone.
If we keep telling you, you'll eventually do it.
We just really need you to do it. It helps out the show tremendously.
And if you've already done it, thank you. If we're not friends, check us out on all of our social media outlets. You can go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the social tab. We often say things and do things on our social media accounts that we don't talk about on the show.
So make sure you're there so you can be a part of the fun.
Fuck shit, damn.
We need a social media intern to join our team. If interested in becoming activist famous or a level 5 vegan, hit us up on social media. Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective, with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to whichsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.